Welcome to Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast with Robert Hyder. This is a no-fluff podcast where we dig deep into the journey of scaling your real estate investing and wholesaling business and discuss how to break into commercial real estate investing. Robert Hyder here with Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast. For those who don't know me, I'll go through my journey a little bit here. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, a lower middle class family. First member of my family to traditionally go to college. Out of college, I got into commercial real estate finance. It worked out really well. I was one of the youngest vice presidents of commercial real estate lending in St. Louis at the age of 25. During my time, I underwrote over $1 billion in commercial real estate deals. And then transitioned into full-time entrepreneurial real estate investing in 2013. When I got into real estate investing personally, I focused more on real estate rehabs, did some rentals and wholesales as I was trying to learn the wholesaling game. I quickly realized that the wholesaling side of the business was more scalable, focused on that heavy, and over the 6 years had exponential growth. In 2019, we will have purchased over 200 houses for wholesale, as well as running a real estate brokerage that'll do 60 million plus in transactions. We started and have since sold a residential property management company. We made a big transition into commercial real estate deals. We own and manage over 110,000 square feet of commercial space, as well as 60 plus residential doors. And the reason I go through all this for you guys is to get into the mission of this podcast, the real reason that I'm here. This is for next level thinkers. We're going to be talking about the newest ideas, the most innovative stuff. We're going to be talking about the 1% and 2% difference, the it factor, the edge, the stuff that really makes some investors great while other investors fail. We're going to be digging deep into work-life balance, mindset. We're going to be having interviews with some of the top folks in the industry, both in the residential and commercial real estate investing sectors, as well as high-level finance guys, maybe even tech guys that have scaled big businesses. If you want to be the best investor that you can be, and you want to get opened up to folks that are doing huge things, how they think, how they make decisions, how they process data, you're in the right spot. Level up world. Level up nation? What sounds good? Level up nation?
Level up nation, I like it.
Yeah, right. Level up real estate nation.
Woo!
Sweet, baby. All right, guys, what's going on? This is going to be a really unique episode. I'm pretty stoked about it. We're going to talk, we're going to do a case study on a commercial real estate deal that I've been working on since about March of last year. So, actually March of this year, March of 2019. So it's a 35,000 square foot retail and office complex in Indianapolis, Indiana. And it's a really, really cool deal. I'm going to dig through the variables on it, kind of how we came across the deal, how we analyzed it, what the financials kind of look like from a high level, and then some of the uniques, some of the things that we look at, some of the things that we dig into for improving the asset. You know, majority of what I do on a day-to-day basis on the commercial real estate side is look for value add opportunities, right? So we want an asset to cash flow and do really well. Also, we want it to be able to do much better with some improvements put into it. Sometimes those improvements are physical. Sometimes they're management related, lease related, all the things associated with that. But at the end of the day, on the commercial real estate side, really what I'm looking at as I'm looking at assets is how do I find deals? How do I find the asset at a discount? Where do I get those deals? And then beyond that, how do I add value to it so that we can produce greater cash flow and create some equity growth above and beyond the discount that we're buying the asset at? So it's very similar to residential real estate for the folks out there that buy residential properties with the intention of kind of rehabbing them, get them cleaned up, and then rent them, right? So you want to buy it at a discount like everybody does. But in addition to that, you want to do the correct improvements to the property, get it leased up, and then maximize your cash flow, maximize your cash on cash return. So it's very similar to that. It's a little bit more complex when you dig into the analysis, but I'm going to try and break it down, make it seem super simple to you guys, or as simple as I can, and then talk about some of the uniques, some of the things that we look on a value add basis. Also, One of the things I'm going to dig into a bunch here are kind of some of the commercial real estate terms, some of the pieces that go into it, talking about different lease types, kind of what to look for, and just general real estate, commercial real estate basic terms. So guys, this property, it's on Emerson Way, 54th and Emerson Way in Indianapolis. Really cool deal. This was actually a referral from our buddy Steve and Brian in Indianapolis, and they got the referral through their meetup, through a group that found out that this guy wanted to sell this commercial asset. Really unique scenario. He was a developer, and he was developing a Walmart retail complex directly across the street. And then on the site, or on the parcel, on the pad that he wanted to develop into a Walmart, it had a Dollar General on that property. So he needed to move that Dollar General somewhere else, with their approval, and then with Dollar General's approval, obviously, and then keep them happy. And then now that the parcel that he was going to build the Walmart on would be cleared. So long story short is he moved the Dollar General over to this retail center. So he bought the property, put Dollar General in it, kind of just been limping along with the deal while he developed the Walmart. Now he just kind of wants to sell the asset. He had a tenant in the property that they had to evict out. Before I get into that, let me give you a little details on the property. It's a 35,000 square foot center. 25,000 square feet of the property is retail real estate, and then 10,000 square feet of the property is office. So he had a tenant in a majority of the office building that he had an agreement with that they would just kind of pay utilities. He would limp along, not charging them much in rent if they paid the utilities, and just kind of took care of the property, and all was going well except until they stopped paying. So he spent about 6 months evicting that tenant out of the property, and which is the reason why this deal has been so delayed. We got it under contract in March, and we're just getting ready to close on it here in about 2 months or so. So in February. But finally got that tenant out of there. So long story short, the office building is totally vacant. The retail center is pretty well leased. We got Dollar General in there, like I mentioned. They take about 10,000 feet of the 25,000 feet. Papa John's, a Chinese restaurant, a pickup and drop off for a dry cleaner. The key difference there is dry cleaners typically have environmental issues if they're actually cleaning the clothes on site. This is simply a pickup and drop off facility. The clothes are shipped somewhere else to be cleaned. So from an environmental standpoint, not really an issue. There is a kind of a pub, a bar and grill in the property, and then there's about 3,000 square feet. It's an end cap that is vacant on the property for some value add purposes there. So long story short, lead source came in from a referral, actually, from a meetup from Brian and Steve in Indianapolis. We know Brian and Steve pretty well. They don't do any commercial, and they said, "Hey, Rob, what do you think about this deal? It kind of got dropped on our laps. Let me know what you think." We dug through the variables and came to a number that it made sense from a high level, and started negotiating there with the seller and got the deal under contract back in March. And then since then, we got delayed for quite a while because we weren't going to buy it until that tenant got out of the office center. And then now we just concluded the due diligence process and renegotiated the deal based on the due diligence. There were quite a bit of issues with the property. It's an older property, and we knew there'd be some. Turned out there was substantially more than we thought. So just kind of got through all of that stuff, and I'll go through those variables, but just got through all of that stuff, finished the due diligence process, and we're ready to rock and roll now. So long story short is we're going to be purchasing the asset for about, thinking these numbers, less the discount. So roughly $1.75 million after the price discount. And we then have to do about $350,000 of improvements to the property to get it up and ready. So we'll be all in for about $2.2 million on the deal. But it's a very, very good deal. That's $350,000 in repairs plus soft costs and hold and carry and so on and so forth. So with everything, it's about $2.2 million. So that's that. So we run through the financials. We ran through the input everything into a rent roll. Obviously, a rent roll just shows you who the tenants are, how much they're paying, when their leases started, when their leases mature. and kind of that, so we can get a conclusion of how much rental income is currently coming in, how much space is vacant, and then we can analyze some market information. We primarily use CBRE.com to analyze market information, both lease rates, absorption, so how fast it'll lease, as well as kind of market trends and what's going on. We use that as a pretty high-level guide, and then from that point, we'll talk to brokers in the market and then just do some basic research on LoopNet. LoopNet is essentially kind of like the MLS for commercial real estate. There's a handful of different sources, but LoopNet works pretty well for us. And we can kind of see what other properties are leasing or what other properties have leased up for in that area. So we were able to use that to kind of analyze what the vacant space would lease for, so on and so forth, and kind of come to the numbers. This property is pretty interesting. It is in a gentrifying area. I'd say it's probably a B or a B minus property, which is kind of right in the wheelhouse we want to be. But I think there's definitely upside in the future for the area. Like I said, a Walmart retail center just went across the street. On the adjacent corner, there's a CVS that just went in. We're seeing a lot of national restaurant chains going in, a Hardee's, a Taco Bell. There's a Starbucks directly across the street. So quite a bit going on. It's definitely still an up-and-coming area. That's why I'm calling it a B minus center. But I think there's very good growth on the rental side as it relates to that. So we've got some big upside as it kind of comes with that. But the financials are strong. You know, we get about a 38% cash-on-cash return off pretty conservative underwriting after about 9 months, right? So initially, right out of the gate on the property, we're going to buy it. We're going to do a fair amount of improvements. Like I said, we got $350,000 in the budget to do improvements, putting new roofs on half of the retail property. Half of the retail property already has a new roof, so the other half we're putting new roof on. The office building, we get new roof, new gutters. The exterior of the building will get painted on the office. There's a couple window seals that are broken, just basic stuff. And then we've got some money in the budget for tenant improvements and other kind of general interior improvements on the office building. We need to do some maintenance on the elevator. This property is on well, so the water is pumped up through the well, so it's not municipal water. So we got to do some improvements on the well, and then also get the water conditioned to make sure that it's nice and clean and it kind of meets all the standards. We got to do that on both the office and the retail building. The retail building, like I said, we got the roof on that's going to get replaced. In addition to that, we're going to do some kind of facade work. There's a big overhang on the property with some signage. So we're going to go through, get that thing all tightened up, painted up. We're going to redo the parking lot, get it top coated, sealed, and striped. Then we're going to update the sign, the main sign in the front of the property, so people see that it's kind of new and things are going on. The tenants' names can be seen. All of that. We'll change out all of the lighting fixtures to LED. There's still tax credits on that, so that helps with the cost. But not even beyond that, just lighting the center up, making it look brighter, a very crisp white light will absolutely help that property. And then beyond that, just general repairs. We've got money in the budget for that vacant 3,000 square foot end cap that I mentioned. We'll get that up to quote unquote white box standard. For those of you who don't know what that means, it really just kind of means that you go through, clean it up, you get the metal studs on the walls, you run the basic electric. If you've got plumbing in the site, so like on that parcel, then you just stub up some plumbing, and then you drywall it and run basic HVAC and just get it to kind of a white drywalled box. That way a tenant can just come in and customize dividing walls, build out anything they need, figure out what kind of flooring they want, if they need to add additional HVAC, if they need to add additional plumbing. Everything's relatively accessible. But all of the walls, all of the electrical outlets and basic stuff is ran. If anything additional is needed, then we just drop it from the ceiling and go. So we'll have that done to the retail, the vacant part of the retail, and kind of go from there. Like I said, the office building is totally vacant. Our buddy Steve and Brian, they came across this deal initially not because they were looking for a commercial deal, more because they were looking for some office space. They needed new office space. They needed more office space for their business in Indianapolis. So long story short is they're going to occupy about 3,700 to 4,000 feet of this space. Also, they'd like to take some additional space in the near future, but they're going to kind of limp into it. But they'll take 40% of the 10,000 square foot office building out of the gate, which is nice because we'll have someone we know, like, and trust on site that can help us manage it from afar. And then we'll hire a leasing broker. Probably get 2 brokers. We'll figure out what it looks like. We'll probably get a broker to lease the office space and then a separate broker to lease the retail end cap. Typically speaking, a good office broker is probably not also working the retail sector of the business, and a good retail broker probably isn't also working the office space. But sometimes when you get in these small assets and these little niche markets, sometimes it's the same. But in this case, there's a fair chance we'll separate those out. But like I mentioned, financials on this property are pretty good. About a 38% cash-on-cash return on this deal within about 9 months to get it stabilized. I don't think it should take too terribly long. We'll only have to occupy or only have to lease up about 6,000 feet on the office building, and only have to lease up about 3,000 feet on the retail building. And even after all of that, I still have a 12% vacancy factor, which is market for that area, in the financials assumed into it when I come up to a 38% cash-on-cash return. So that's some of that. Also, like I said, my numbers are pretty conservative. We assume a below-market lease rate. I don't want to have to stretch the leasing to have to get the property stabilized. So in my financial analysis, I'm assuming a really conservative lease rate. And then if we do better, hell yeah, bonus goes to the bottom line. If not, it's within expectations and we're not, blowing the budget and having it be a big issue on that front. But beyond all of that, so that's what's going on. The deal's pretty good. We're buying it, like I said, we'll be all in for about $2.2 million. I think, conservatively speaking, once we just lease it up with a 12% vacancy, like I mentioned, once we lease it up to that level without really pushing rents, coming in below market on rents, we'll have about a 30% equity premium, so a 30% equity capture on this deal. I think it'll be worth about $2.8, $2.9 million on a 9 cap, give or take, on a conservative lease rate. Also, I think we'll be able to kind of knock down some of the expenses on the asset once we get up and into it, but for now, I've been pretty conservative on the analysis, and we'll kind of see how it shakes. But even on a very conservative basis, like I said, 38% cash on cash. In addition to that, we'll have a 30% equity capture on the deal. And from a risk standpoint, we're at a B- to B kind of area. So there's definitely a premium on just general market growth, given that the area is still up and coming, and some additional benefits from dropping expenses and raising rents over time. But the other really good piece is with this property, the rent rates are relatively low. They're below market, and they're just kind of at the low end of the leasing spectrum just in general. On the retail property, the average lease rate for the whole center is under $11. Dollar General's leasing the property for $9, $9 and some change. So, the good part about it is it's very conservative. It's very risk adverse because there's not a whole lot of places that you can go and lease good property, especially after we update it, new roof, update the HVAC, update the wells, pretty up the front, new parking lot, new lighting, spend all this money making it look very nice and tightening it up. There's not gonna be a whole lot of places you can go and lease for $11 a foot. Kind of around there. Market's about $15 to $16 a foot for a lot of this space, given the market research that we've done. So that allows for a lot of premium. I'm not baking that into the numbers. I would love for that to occur and then recognize that all to the bottom line after the fact. But that's kind of how we look at it. Trying to look at it pretty conservative. Buy things right, and then add value, and expect everything on a conservative level, and be ecstatic if that does not occur, or be ecstatic if it does occur. I'm sorry, be ecstatic if we do better than we thought on lease rates, better than we thought on vacancy, if we can run it more efficiently and drop expenses, things of that nature. So cool, guys. So that's a little bit about it. So that's kind of the financials. Like I said, we analyze the market data. We primarily use CBRE.com to get the general market data. It's a great source. You can find You can find information specifically on the market when it comes to lease rate, vacancy rates, absorption, if there's new buildings being built, if there's new space coming online in the near future. You can also see really kind of high-level market data on a specific market. In this case, it's Indianapolis. Indianapolis is booming in terms of the Midwest. They're ranked number 2 in the Midwest for tech cities. They've got great sports in that city. Population growth is very strong. Business growth, like organic business growth, is very strong. They are very diverse in their employment base, which is great for downside risk. Like there's certain markets that are propped up by single kind of industry, tech, for example, right? Cities that are big on tech, if tech takes a dip during the recession, well, that city is going to have a greater than average drop in overall market rates, right, and overall market performance. So this market is very, very diverse, and we're at the low end on the pricing. So pretty secure, pretty sheltered from risk from that standpoint, and it's a very strong asset. But most of the data comes from that. We then cross-reference that against like kind of what we're seeing actively on LoopNet in regards to lease and sale rates, and then we'll talk with a few brokers in that market to just double and triple check all of our assumptions and all of our analysis. In this case, we added some value on this property. It was, the developer that doesn't really deal with these older properties, so it's not really something they're looking at every day. So he was kind of trying to get it off of his plate. He primarily bought it because he needed to move Dollar General across the street, like I mentioned. And then in addition to that, the fact that the office building is vacant and we're coming to this property with a tenant in hand, that's a very big benefit for this kind of property. So we can immediately put a tenant in place to start generating some income on the office space. That's a big benefit of something that we've got going on. So that's a big value add there. Beyond that, we're looking to, increase rents over time. A lot of these tenants are leasing below market, like I mentioned. And when it comes to the leases, a majority of these leases are modified gross. Just stick with me for a minute. Modify on the lease. Modified gross just means that you pay your rent, but you also have some reimbursements you have to pay to the landlord for expenses associated with the property. In a minute, I'll go over all the different lease types and some of that data, but for now, just know that that's the case. So long story short, the tenants are responsible for paying some of the common area maintenance, common area expenses, increases in real estate taxes, increases in insurance, increases in snow removal and landscaping year over year. The tenants will be responsible for some of those fees. Currently, the landlord is kind of sitting back on his heels. He's not billing these tenants for those. So we anticipate billing the tenants for those expenses. Not all of them. When you're talking about B- centers, you can't expect that you're going to collect all of that, but we should be able to collect at least half to 3/4 of that and be able to get there. So that'll all go to the bottom line, which is not really in the assumptions. A lot of times we see that landlords, especially older landlords or folks that have just kind of been doing it on their own, they'll lease the space incorrectly. They'll lease it on a net square footage basis, so kind of inside the walls, the footage. When an office space, for example, it's typically leased on a gross basis, so it's leased on the exterior of the walls. And the common areas that you use, the entryway, the entry foyer, the elevator, kind of shaft area, the common hallways, common bathrooms. So tenants are typically responsible for a pro rata share of those expenses. So if you had 10,000 square foot building, but the common area made up, say, 15% of the property, well, the tenants would be responsible for not only their space, but whatever their portion of the property they lease, they'd be responsible for those expenses as well. So if a tenant had 25% of the leasable space, they'd be responsible for 25% of the common area expenses, common area footage. So, but it's often leased incorrectly. A lot of landlords don't include that. So when you're looking at these properties from a value add standpoint, if you look at it and you say, oh, well, wow, the footage that they're actually leasing on the rent roll doesn't equal the footage from the county or the footage that the architectural drawings are showing, Well, that could be that they're leasing it incorrectly and you've got upside over time. If they're currently tenants in place, you can't really do anything because it's already leased. But as they roll, you can start to bump up that footage to reflect the actual footage they should be leasing. So that's a good value add. There's a bunch of different ways. As we go through more of these case studies and we dig through this, we'll talk quite a bit more about different value adds because there's 100 different ways you can do that. And on some of the deals that we do, we get really, really creative and we have some great value add strategies. This one's a basic commercial real estate deal. I think some of the big benefits are just going to be raising lease rates and just getting better tenants in over time, leasing up some of the vacant space. We came to this deal with a tenant in hand, and through due diligence, we were able to negotiate a pretty good price reduction to offset some capital improvements that have to go into the property. So when we have to, by the time that we are starting to really take off the property, the entire property will have a new roof. A majority of the HVACs will be replaced. The exteriors of the properties will be tightened up. There'll be new lighting, new parking lot, top coated, sealed, and striped. There'll be new finish in a lot of the office space. The retail space will be white boxed, and it'll just look like a nice new tightened up center. So it should really help when we go to push lease rates. It should help get us where we need to be if the property looks that updated and looks sharp and like it's been well maintained. So those are some of the variables that we've really been digging into. Like I mentioned, I went through the numbers with you guys. I think it's going to be a pretty good deal. 38% cash on cash return on a conservative basis with additional up over time and some pretty good value add. I did mention I was going to go over some of the lease stuff. So really when it comes to commercial real estate, there are 3 different types of leases. There is triple net or net lease. There is a modified gross lease, and there is a gross lease. Gross leases are also referred to as full service leases. Those are the basic 3, right? Net lease, modified gross, and gross/full service. So a net lease typically means that the tenant is responsible for all expenses associated with the property. So they pay you rent as the landlord, and then the tenant is responsible for the real estate taxes. They're responsible for the insurance. They're responsible for utilities. They're responsible for certain upkeep associated with the property. So the tenant has a lot of responsibility and a lot of expenses to pay above and beyond the rent, right? So if you look at a spectrum, right, this on the net side of the lease, that is very highly related to the tenant paying a vast majority of the expenses in addition to the rent. In the middle, it's more of a modified gross. Modified gross means it's a gross lease, so the landlord or the tenant pays the landlord rent, and then they will pay a portion of common area maintenance, maybe a portion of real estate taxes, maybe a portion of utilities. A portion of insurance, and that's typically above and beyond the year that they move in the property. So let's say this retail center had real estate taxes of $25,000 a year, and when they moved in in 2019. Well, in 2020, if real estate taxes go up to $30,000, well, that tenant would be responsible for the increase in real estate taxes. So there'd be a $5,000 increase in real estate taxes. If that tenant had 20% of the property that they leased, well, they'd be responsible for 20% of the increase in real estate taxes. So 20% of the $5,000, which is the increased amount, would be $1,000. They'd be responsible to reimburse the landlord for that $1,000, right? So that's more of a modified gross. There are just specific variables that the tenant is responsible for reimbursing the landlord for. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum as the net, right? If you keep into account, the net means the tenant pays a lot of the expenses. Modified gross means the tenant pays some of the expenses. And then other side of the spectrum, gross or full service, that essentially just means that the tenant pays the landlord a rental fee, and then the landlord is responsible for all expenses. So if full service means the tenant just pays the landlord a fee for rent, just pays rent, and that's it. They don't have to reimburse for expenses. They don't reimburse for anything. That's all they do is just pay the rent, and it's good to go. They can move in, and they're ready to rock. So that's the spectrum on the lease side. There are uniques and little niche variables that kind of come in. There are some offshoots of a net lease, but for the most part, those are the three basic commercial real estate lease types for you to know. If you just Google commercial lease types, it'll give you a breakdown. Very soon, I'll include some of this information kind of in the show notes, but it's relatively basic. Just remember those are the three types. You can kind of go from there. And over time, we'll be adding more and more data to these case studies. We've got a couple really, really cool deals that we bought in the last couple of years that'll make for great case studies. So stay tuned for all of that. And we'll just keep digging and getting you guys some really good data. Like I mentioned, this deal was pretty unique on a lot of fronts. But one of the really cool things is it came from a meetup lead. And it came to our buddy Steve and Brian, who own a residential real estate investment company. But they had this deal come up, and they don't do commercial. They didn't know a whole lot about it, but they like the idea of owning commercial, but they just don't know enough, right? So they shot it over to me and said, "Hey, what do you think? Is this something you'd be interested in? Do you want to buy this deal?" Well, that actually comes up quite a bit. So if any of you guys out there come across commercial real estate deals, you don't quite know what to do with them, you think it might be a deal, but you want me to dig into it, or it's some deal that you just kind of want to kick off. Who knows what the scenario is? But on this deal, for example, this one in Indianapolis, Steve and Brian are gonna stay in the deal, have ownership equity in this deal. I help them structure it, I help them put it together, and we're essentially going to do it together. So pretty good opportunity. If you come across anything and you want my advice, you just want me to look at it, we can set up something. Or if you want to partner on any deals that you come across, let us know. Just email me at info@robertheider.com, Robert HEYDER.com, and either myself or one of the folks on our team will kind of dig through the financials and see if it's something that we'd be interested in, or see if there's something we can help you on. So keep us in mind as you're kind of coming across these deals, and I think there's absolutely great opportunities out there still, and as we kind of tick along, there'll be even more. So keep us in mind, and hopefully we'll make something work. Hey guys, as always, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Bottleneck Real Estate Virtual Assistants. These guys are fantastic. We've been using them for years in our business. They've really helped us scale. Hopefully you guys like them as much as we do. If you want to get in touch, it's bottleneckrealestate.com, bottleneckrealestate.com, and I think you will be very happy with them. If you've got some good quality content out of that, if you think it would help anybody, please go to iTunes or SoundCloud or whoever you're listening to this on and subscribe to the podcast. Also, please give us a 5-star rating. It really helps get us out there. If you do subscribe and give us a 5-star rating, take a screenshot of it, email it over to info@robertheider.com, Robert HEYDER.com, and register for you guys to win a free one-on-one coaching session with myself or one of our guests. They were nice enough to give up some of their time, so thank you for that. Also, please follow us on social media, Robert_Heider at Instagram, Robert_Heider at Instagram. We'll drop some really quality content there. Also, I almost forgot, if you guys want a free commercial real estate guide and commercial real estate analysis tool, just go to the website, robertheider.com, fill out that brief little form, and we'll email that over to you. It's a really, really good tool just to be able to analyze deals quickly, understand kind of what's going on, see if it's actually a deal. All right, guys, thanks. Until the next one.